Wow, wasn't that a fantastic video, everyone? So, hello everyone who are joining us for our Manifesto launch. Very warm welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us for tonight's event. This is the 2022 Labour Manifesto launch for Preston City Council, so welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jade Morgan. I've been a councillor for Preston for nearly 6 years now, where I serve as the council's member champion for women and lead member for gender. So my main role being to help ensure the council is as progressive and equal as possible in terms of our female representation and helping to make sure our policies are gender and family friendly. I'm also a candidate in this upcoming election next month in Preston, where I hope to be re-elected to my home ward of St Matthews, where I grew up, and it's such an honour to be one of the councillors to represent that area and in Preston. So if you know St Matt's, we're unfortunately one of the poorest wards in the city, and that's why I think it's so important that we're all here tonight to see this manifesto launch, because Preston Labour and this Preston Labour administration is intent on lifting up communities like St Matt's, who are plunged into poverty and living on the breadline consistently by this Tory government, and rebuilding ourselves back up in a post-COVID Preston, which we all know is going to have some really serious, long-lasting effects on both our people and the city. Preston Labour running this administration has been absolutely crucial, not only over the period of COVID, but over the period of austerity, as despite adversity, we've managed to not only stop the gutting of our vital services, but we're dedicated to flourishing too and making changes to better the lives of people living here. So thank you all for joining us tonight and being part of this journey with us. So without further ado, let's introduce our first speaker for tonight. He's someone I'm sure all of you will know, having served as Preston's MP now for almost 22 years. He's an extremely dedicated MP, often travelling long hours between Preston and Westminster, where he consistently fights to hold the Conservative government to account. So if everyone could please welcome Mark Hendrick. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, and thanks for the intro, Jade. Obviously, Preston local authority is doing some great stuff, very progressive, and it's doing its utmost to try and protect the people of Preston from the worst effects and to mitigate the bad effects of what this government is doing. And as much as Preston and the City Council are doing great work, I'm afraid, obviously, the cost of living crisis will dominate this election. And therefore, I think it's very important indeed that we get across the messages that will show people that not only locally is Preston doing a good job, but nationally the Labour Party is doing a good job and can replace the tragedy that is this Conservative government. The British people are facing the worst fall in living standards on record, with working people being hit with the biggest tax burden since the 1940s. The Chancellor has left households and businesses to fend for themselves in the middle of a cost of living crisis, as people are set to see the biggest drop in incomes on record this year. Workers in the North West will see their real earnings fall by £1,195 a year by 2023 under the Chancellor's plans relative to inflation. And under the Tories, families will be £2,600 worse off because of their tax hikes and failures to tackle the cost of living crisis. Now, before the Ukraine war, inflation was already spiralling, and Conservatives' choices and a decade of failure have left the UK exposed to a crisis. Starve or freeze is the choice now facing many families. Labour's called for a one-off windfall tax on the billions of pounds of bumper profits that oil and gas companies are making. The government instead are offering to buy a buy now, pay later £200 loan scheme, which doesn't offer any help until October. And it's actually an alternative, as they would put it, to a tax on oil and gas, which we recommend. A Labour government would also get the economy firing on all cylinders, making sure that we tax fairly, spend wisely, and try and grow the economy. Now, what have we been doing in Westminster? We've recently had opposition day debates on national insurance rises, cost of living increases on pensioners, sackings at P&O ferries. Constituents have written to me with dozens of emails and campaigns related to the cost of living crisis. And as Preston's MP have obviously tabled parliamentary questions on energy poverty, energy grants, prepayment energy meters, energy investment and cost of living issues in general. And what we've seen under Conservatives is considerable amounts of failure. Inflation is forecast to hit 7.4% this year, the highest rate in 30 years, with the price of petrol, food and energy all soaring. Under this government, Britain is facing the highest tax burden in 70 years, with the Chancellor confirming £24 billion of additional tax rises about to hit. The Chancellor's promised a small tax cut in 2024, putting the Tory re-election campaign over and above helping people to pay their bills now. And the lack of a long-term plan for growing the economy or wages stands out like a sore thumb. The Chancellor's plans do not tackle waste or fraud that has run riot under his watch, nor any vision for creating prosperity and security across the UK. And in February, Ofgem announced that the domestic energy price cap would increase from its current equivalent annual level of £1,277 per year to £1,971 a year this month. That's a 54% increase in a matter of months. And in the spring statement, the Chancellor does not understand the scale of the challenge we face, only announcing to cut fuel duty of 5p per litre for 12 months. And this has raised the threshold at which workers start paying national insurance contributions and outlined an income tax rate cut of 1p to be implemented by 2024. Now, Sunak did not scrap his national insurance hike, which was planned for April this month, despite calls from both opposition MPs and Tory MPs themselves. And low-income households, as we know, spend a larger proportion than average on energy and food, so will be more affected by price increases, with estimates that an extra 1.3 million people will fall into absolute poverty in 2023, including 500,000 children. Benefits are increasing this month by less than the current level of our expected level of inflation, which will put pressure on households relying on these payments. The £20 a week universal credit increase announced in March 2020 was withdrawn in October of last year, which meant a fall in income of £20 per week for over 4 million families. The Tories have failed pensioners over the last decade by allowing the number and rate of pensioners living in poverty to soar, breaking promises to protect retirees with cuts to the basic state pension. The triple lock has been broken, working pensioners have been taxed more, and there are thousands without pension credit. Food supply chains have been under pressure recently due to COVID-19, labour shortages, climate change, and an increase in the oil and gas prices, all of which have contributed to a rise in food prices. These problems have been exacerbated by the Ukraine war, which has led to restrictions on two of the world's most significant exporters of foodstuffs and fertilisers. Well, what will Labour do? Labour proposed back in January, as I said, to use a one-off windfall tax on North Sea oil and gas, and this would cut household energy bills by up to £600, including through removing VAT from energy bills. Britain needs an energy strategy that fast-forwards on nuclear, increases wind energy, on offshore, and that helps insulate homes. We need to drive down energy bills for working people, saving up to £400 off the average energy bill for families, and spending £6 billion a year on a scheme to upgrade 19 million homes with insulation. We need to deliver energy security and sovereignty for the UK, cutting gas imports by 15%. We've got to support good jobs in every region of the country and power our future by tackling the climate emergency. Labour will put in place a strategy to provide older and retired people with the security and prosperity they deserve. And if you remember, the last Labour government reduced pensioner poverty by over 1 million and half the rate of pensioner poverty too. The party would also increase and expand the warm homes discount, targeting extra support to the squeezed middle, pensioners and the lowest earners, saving 21,030 households in Preston up to £600 off fuel bills in total, and preventing all of the increase in energy bills currently expected. So that's just a taste of what Labour could do in government. But of course, we've got to get to government first. And a big step in that direction is making sure that you vote Labour whether you're in Preston or anywhere else in the country. It's essential we get that Labour government, and these local elections are the first step in the direction of getting that Labour government. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. That was fantastic. And obviously, thank you for taking the time out to come and talk to us tonight. And keep sticking it to the Tories for us in Westminster. So our next speaker is Amina Khan. Amina is here tonight to talk to us about the effect that Labour councils have had on anchor institutions and the NHS targeting recruitment in our less well-off areas, specifically aimed at women and minority communities. Amina, thank you so much for joining us. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and what you're here to talk to us about tonight?
Thanks, Jade. So my name's Amina Khan. I work at Sahara in Preston as an employability coordinator. Sahara is a charity organisation who works predominantly for the benefit of BME women. We are based in the heart of the local community in the Fishwick area of Preston, and through our holistic, confidential and culturally sensitive approach, we try to better each user's lives and we try to establish how it is we can help them best. And we do this through the services we provide, such as advocacy, where we support issues regarding housing, benefits, immigration, money management, school appeals, things like that. And we also run adult training courses to upskill users in ESOL, maths, IT, and also qualifications. We also run a mental health project. So that's where we focus on the bespoke needs and issues that BME women have. And we also do that through our coffee afternoon groups that we have, which kind of target women who are elderly, like over 50s, and who are isolated and suffering from mental health issues such as depression, anxiety. And we help them by supporting them through some talks that we host, and also organising outdoor trips for them and promoting cultural integration. And where my area of work comes in is through employability. So at the moment, we run a bilingual job club every Friday, and we do this to help users who are quite vulnerable, who need additional support in finding employment. And we work in partnership with organisations such as Community Gateway, DWP and Inspira. And we've also hosted job fair events in the past to kind of promote employability for our users and provide opportunities for women and ethnic minorities. So this leads me on to the work that we've done in partnership with Labour, specifically Councillor Matthew Brown, where we've tried to recruit for the NHS, and we've invited them for the NHS event that we hosted on Thursday, the 3rd of March. And that was to help boost employability in the deprived wards of Preston. So as you guys are probably aware, in Labour's election manifesto, it sort of highlights the importance of working for a real living wage employer and avoiding 0-hour contract employers where possible. And Labour, in conjunction with Sahara, we sort of identified kind of like the high percentage of food poverty and deprivation in local Preston wards, and linked this to the fact that the residents were often either like unemployed or they were working for employers with 0-hour contracts. And so what we wanted to do together is to sort of bring in the NHS, who are obviously a real living wage employer, who are currently recruiting, obviously for lots of roles, but mainly for the healthcare assistant role, and to try and promote our users, our residents, into these positions so they can sort of establish themselves, and making sure that, you know, in terms of their earnings and in terms of like their wealth, it's sort of building on that. So through our partnership work, we've pushed for women and ethnic minorities to be employed by the NHS. And with the event that we hosted, we had over 80 users in attendance, and we had Councillor Matthew Brown, along with Councillor Freddie Bailey, also the Preston City Council Community Engagement Department and Lancashire Adult Learning. And we invited guest speakers to the event, along with the NHS HR manager of the local hospitals, Royal Preston and Chorley and South Ribble. So what this event was basically for was to try and get our users of the local area into positions which would benefit them. So we primarily focused on the healthcare assistant role, and we also supported this by piloting a healthcare assistant course, which users could sign up for on the day. And that's just happened. I think we finished it last week. It was a 3-week course where it supported them in actually applying for the healthcare assistant role, told them about the expectations of working for the NHS, especially for those who have never really been employed before, understanding the world of employment. And upon successful completion, this course guaranteed them job interviews. So that was a really successful kind of outcome from the event. In addition, we also had the NHS Jobs Fair in the afternoon, which was sort of promoting all the other roles and vacancies that were available at the time at local hospitals. And we also found there the outcomes were quite good in that people were sort of being given direct contacts, emails, which they could send their CVs to. And we have found that quite a lot of our users have found employment in other areas as well, such as like nursing assistants, kitchen porters, catering assistants, those kind of roles. So I think it's just been really great that, you know, we managed to work, Sahara's managed to work with Labour in order to boost employability for the residents in these wards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mina. It's so great to know about all the fantastic work that you and Sahara are doing with the council to help people get into employment and things like that. So that's really fantastic. And thank you very much for joining us. So introducing our next contributor, he's someone that will be very familiar to many of us. Former Labour leader from 2010 to 2015 and now Shadow Secretary of State for Climate Change and Net Zero. Ed Miliband has been a key figure in the government since he was elected in 2005, serving many important roles and positions and consistently fights back against Tory cuts and policies. Let's go to Ed and hear what he has to say.
Hi friends, it is great to be speaking at the Preston Labour Manifesto launch. My only regret is I'm not actually in Preston, which you can see. But I am delighted to be with you virtually. As you can see, I am on a train. I'm doing travels around Britain as part of the local election campaign. But I wanted to send this message, first of all, to say how privileged I am to be speaking at this event because of what you've achieved in Preston over these past years. Preston has been a leader on so many things that matter. Of course, community wealth building. You've shown a model for how you can transform your community, and I am incredibly excited by what you have done. I call myself a Brownite, a Matthew Brownite for that reason. I'm also incredibly excited by your manifesto, which has lots and lots of really exciting ideas about the future. Some people don't think that energy efficiency is sexy or exciting. I do, as you might guess. And energy efficiency features big style in your manifesto, and I want to have a Labour government working with you on energy efficiency with our £60 billion 10-year pledge to insulate 19 million homes that are cold and drafty across our country. And why does this matter? It matters because it's about bringing down bills, it's about energy security, and it is about tackling the climate crisis. The last thing I'll say is this: policy really matters, but vision matters even more. And you have that vision in Preston. You have that vision for the future, and you have that vision of where Labour stands on people's side, saying there is something we can do to tackle the inequalities of wealth, power and income in our country. So congratulations to you for all the work you've done. Congratulations for all the hard work you're going to do in the weeks and months ahead. And I look forward to a successful set of election results in Preston in May.
Brilliant. It's so fantastic to have the support of Ed Miliband with us, even if he's unfortunately not able to be here tonight. And I think it just goes to show the reach that our manifesto and that our policies and the work that our council is doing has such a far reach, even going beyond Preston to Westminster. Our next speaker tonight is Andy Birchall from the Preston Cooperative Education Centre. Now, Andy's here to talk about our Labour Council support for work-owned businesses and how the union-backed Cooperative Education Centre is helping us to achieve that aim. Andy, thanks so much for agreeing to be here tonight. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. You won't hear me okay, I'm not quite sure. I'm a bit of a technical. But yes, thank you for that introduction. I started been working as a coal miner and been in the trade union like distance. I was during me I had to change direction. It was largely because of access to adult education, higher education. I changed career paths and became college lecturer at Preston College in Humanities, and then over in Training and Education. And from learning as an adult, it just seems so natural. So when Preston, Matthew, I've known Matthew for a few years, became very, very famous with the Preston Monarch, but that's another story. And what Preston was attempting to do, I said to attend. Yeah, this is it. Should have never let
Sorry to interrupt, Andy. Your connection seems to be a little bit fuzzy and we're struggling to hear you a little bit. Is it possible if you can maybe see if you could get that fixed and then we can bring you back in later? So just obviously we don't want to miss what you've got to say. It is really important. It just seems your connection is just a tad fuzzy with us right now and we're struggling to hear you a little bit. Is that all right? I'm really sorry to interrupt you there.
No, I don't think it's... I've tried everything. I've got all the advice that it gave me with direct to the router and the headphone and the computer, and nothing's to be working. So I'll try again, but I'm not sure what to do.
Yeah, so I think what we'll do in this situation is we'll bring in our next speaker. Maybe you have a chat with our IT guy, just maybe see if we can sort something out. As we obviously do really want to hear what you have to say, as it is really important. And then fingers crossed we can bring you back in. And just because we want to hear what you have to say in full, and it's just a bit fuzzy at the moment. So we'll just bring in the next speaker, and then fingers crossed we'll have you back out straight away. But thank you so much anyway. So just while hopefully we can get that sorted out, we're just going to bring in our next speaker. So our next speaker is someone I am very excited to introduce. So Grace Blakeley is a very prominent economic and political commentator. She's also the author of multiple books, including Stolen and The Corona Crash, which also talk about really important issues. Grace, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a real pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks so much for that lovely introduction, Jade, and it is great to be here. So yeah, I want to talk today a little bit about why I'm so excited to be kind of involved with what's going on in Preston, and particularly talk about why the agenda that people like Matt Brown and the council as a whole have championed over the last several years, the kind of community wealth building, municipal socialism agenda is so important. I think what we've seen in Preston, and we've certainly seen this over successive elections, where even last time when we saw kind of pretty disappointing results in some parts of the country, Preston doing really well, is that the democratization of the economy that I think is really central to the idea of community wealth building is going to be the only way that the Labour Party is going to be able to win back seats that have been lost. And also the only way to kind of help build power across an economy in which power has become extremely centralized in just a few hands. And this has taken place over the last several decades, but particularly over the course of the pandemic. We need to democratize the economy if we're going to deal with all of those big challenges. And if we're going to speak to a population that largely feels kind of left behind and ignored by political elites that are centered in Westminster. I think, you know, there's been this kind of shift over the course of the pandemic where people have kind of been saying, oh, the state has been brought back into management of the economy. And that's great because actually, you know, Rishi Sunak did everything that was in Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto. And we've got kind of socialism now at the level of the British state. Now, that was obviously always untrue, but I think it's become very, very clear over the last few months that you know, was a completely misguided way to view the increase in intervention that we saw over the past few years. You know, we only saw an increase in government spending because that was what big business, big finance needed. And much of that wealth that was dished out by the Treasury ended up in the pockets of bankers, of, you know, landlords, and of, you know, big, powerful corporations. And now those interests don't kind of need as much support anymore, or most of those interests don't need as much support anymore, then we're just back to the same old language around austerity, around cuts, around privatization, just, you know, back to business as usual. Except this time, we're probably going to be seeing, as some of the other speakers have outlined, just the deepest and most sustained increase in poverty and fall in living standards that we've seen, you know, certainly in my lifetime, much worse even than the financial crisis of 2008, and perhaps worse in terms of the total impact, even than the pandemic itself. It's really hard to over exaggerate quite how severe this crisis is going to be, and just the extent of the increase in poverty that we're going to see throughout the whole of society. So, when you have a state like the one we have that is only responsive to the interests of capital and isn't responsive to the interests of the vast majority of people, then Rishi Sunak is going to obviously continue to do what he's been doing over the past several years, which is just respond to the needs of capital. And this is why I think community wealth building and the democratization of the state is so important. The democratization of our society is so important. Because if we're going to respond to the cost of living crisis, if we're going to respond to things like climate breakdown, if we're going to respond to the crisis of democracy that's come to afflict our society that we've seen, in the Brexit vote and in the kind of constitutional crises that have characterized the last several years, then we need to put the voices of the people who are being most affected by those things on the front line and actually involve them in political decision making. And really what neoliberalism was all about was about removing the voices of working people from those political decision making processes. The whole outsourcing model that Preston has really pushed back against was all about not just kind of, carving up the public sector and dishing parts of it off to private corporations so that they could, make higher profits. It was actually about making sure that the voices of service users couldn't be involved in the decision-making processes that were taking place about how those services were being deployed. If you are trying to, as anyone who has tried to kind of, talk to Capita or another one of these outsourcing organizations will know, they are one step removed from the kind of democratic process, from democratic structures, which means that they're protected, they're insulated from democratic pressure. And we've seen this, throughout the last kind of 30, 40 years, a big central part of what neoliberalism was all about through outsourcing and privatization was about making sure that pressure could not be brought to bear on the state in ways that it had been brought to bear on the state in previous years. So, that was the destruction of the labor movement. It was the kind of evisceration of local councils and the massive centralization of power that you saw during that time. And the left has been a bit kind of like unsure, I think, since the financial crisis about how to respond to that. We know that we need things like a Green New Deal, right? We know that we need a big amount of like investment at the level of the state to be able to decarbonize our economy, to be able to respond to all these crises that have been affecting us. But we're not always 100% sure about how we respond to this crisis of representation, how we respond to that line of we need to take back control. And I think what we're seeing in Preston with this idea of community wealth building, with kind of, people power really being brought back into local government, is the answer to that question, is the answer to how we really take back control, to how we empower people to be able to make decisions that affect, their lives. Whereas, recently the whole impetus behind the way that the state works, the way the economy works, has been to kind of make people feel disempowered, to make them feel like, even if they want to change the world, there is absolutely no possible way that people could organize to be able to build a different kind of society. That's actually what I think is the biggest barrier to socialism and to socialist politics today. It's not that people don't want things to change. Most people know our economy doesn't work for the vast majority of people. It's that people don't think change is possible. They don't have that sense of control and power over their lives to feel as though they have the capacity to be able to deliver that change. And that's why it's so exciting to see these really kind of, brilliant projects being delivered at the local level, because it gives people a sense that actually change is possible, that there is another way of organizing our society. There is another way of organizing our economy. And it's not one that's kind of based on this like extractive neoliberal model, which is all about centralizing power in a tiny number of hands. It's actually about decentralizing power, about handing power back to local communities, and within those communities, about making sure that workers, that service users are really the ones whose voices are being put at the forefront of political decision making. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to respond to this crisis, is by putting the voices of people who are most affected by the cost of living crisis in positions of power. That's why this model is so radical and so exciting to see. And it's why actually, you know, Preston Council has been doing so well and has engaged so many people in this project. It's because, as well as creating wealth locally, the council has actually been handing people power, has been empowering people to change their own lives. And I think that's really, really exciting. It's the foundations of, you know, a movement that is designed to build a democratic economy in which working people up and down the country can take control of local government, can take control of public services, and can take control of the economy much more broadly. And I'm going to stop there and hand over to, I think it's Dave Ward who's next, is it? And we need, again, to make sure that we're also empowering workers through the labour movement, which I'm sure Dave can speak to.
Thank you so much for that, Grace. That was fantastic, and we're really obviously happy to have your support on there. So we're just going to have a couple more speakers first, just before we bring Andy back, just so that we can obviously make sure he's got all his IT problems solved. So our next speaker obviously is going to be John Gavin of the Leighton Street Housing Cooperative. John's going to speak to us about how our Labour Council has supported Preston's traveller community by supporting the adoption of the site and leasing it to a cooperative run by residents, which has then enabled them to remain in their homes. John, thank you so much for joining us tonight to speak about such an important issue. I hope you're doing okay tonight. I think you may need to possibly unmute yourself first, if possible.
Hold on.
There we go. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Thanks, John.
The dog's bite my toes. I've lived in a Leighton Street caravan site for 32 years. I've been in charge of it. And to be honest, 4 years ago, County Council decided they were selling the site. 3 years ago, decided they were selling the site, and wanting and the possibility that people would be that was there all their lives would be forced off the site. And so one thing or another, they did a consultation. They did, and when they're doing the consultation, a couple of friends of mine, Dave and Sue, they were members of the Ashton Labour Club in Preston, and they would come down to, and we went to the consultation in the county hall, and the findings of the consultation, the county council Conservative run, was 85% against selling the sites, and they completely ignored the findings. Completely, never gave anyone thought that was it. So they decided to offer the sites to local councils. So Dave and Sue said they're going to bring it up at their next meeting, at the Aston Labour meeting. So one thing led to another. We started campaigning. We got in touch with the United Unions, met local business and people, friends and people around all the area residents. Start getting things going, campaigning, which I never did before, knew nothing about it, denying people, of course. So basically, one thing led to another. Dave and Sue came back and said, John said, they've been watching every decision. The Labour Council said, Matthew Brown, Newedy Khan, Robert Boswell, starting with Nathan Peter Kelly, all the names. They've been watching everybody. So everything's going on. They already knew that they were watching just to see what decision the Labour Council, the Conservative Council was going to say. So then they turned around and they said they actually want to have a meeting. Will that be okay to get in touch with you? Yes, no problem. So 2 days later, the council officers rung up and made a meeting for us all to meet down in my home. And they came down. Within the week, they came down, and some of the councillors in the council, they all came down and they looked around the site and were talking and chatting and things like that. What's the situations? And they already knew the biggest majority was if the site was sold, there was a lot of interest to people. They would have been forced out. They would have been forced out. So basically, I'm speaking to Matthew Brown on our own, walking around, and he said, "Don't worry," he said. "If we can't find one way, we will find another," he said. And to be honest, I had little faith in any parties, just to be quite honest about it, be truthful. I think I ought to tell you what you want to hear and then forget about you. But as time went on, they didn't do that. They actually did push pressure on everybody. And then we had the COVID, the coronaviruses. And as time and time went on, more Labour people started getting involved, and all sorts just kept building up, and the county council was still pushing to get rid of it. They wanted it off their hands. But when the coronavirus, it just slowed everything down. And then Matthew Brown came up with the idea of a cooperative, which I had no idea about what the cooperative was, because I was self-employed basically. So he came up and he explained it, him and more friends of ours from Unite, the unions, and all start chatting with Dave and Sue. And to be honest, when it works through it works a good idea. It sounded a good idea. And the more I realised it, my ignorance was wrong, my attitude towards not thinking people cared. And to be honest, I felt a bit ashamed of myself with the way I was thinking. And they come along, and a few times I spoke to Matthew on the phone, Neil Cam spoke to Robert Boswell, and they were 100% committed that the people was not going to lose their homes, and children would have to stay in their own schools. Basically, things every woman wants with her children keep in school. So basically, there were a lot of pressures on me at the time before they got involved. And to be honest, it just lifted a weight off my shoulders. They did. I knew these people are sincere. I got different vibes when I was talking to them than I did previous off anybody else. And I knew that everything was going to work out okay. But it took some time. But at the end of the day, they did. It did work out. And it's in the final process now, I've sort of released them. And it is looking good. And to be honest, I can't say, but I ask anybody and I tell everyone I know and anybody to vote Labour. And to be honest, I do apologise for my ignorance of thinking nobody cared. But when I was completely wrong, I thought everyone was going to treat us the same as the Conservative Party would. But that's be truthful about it, speaking honestly. And to be honest, anything I'd do to go forward with Labour, I would do it. And recommend Labour all day long, because they won't see you stuck, as far as I can see. They're there for you.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. Thank you so much, John. I think it just goes to show as well that what can happen when a council actually works with residents and hears their issues and actually works to solve their issues, rather than trying to just give them false promises all the time. So I'm very happy to see that we've now got a new supporter, and obviously we're so happy to have you here tonight. And thank you so much for telling us about your story.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So our next speaker that we're going to have is Dave Ward, who is the General Secretary of Communication Workers Union. Now, with over 200,000 members, CWU is one of the biggest and most powerful unions in the country, and they're doing fantastic work supporting us down on the ground. So Dave, thank you so much for agreeing to talk with us tonight. It is an honour to have you here.
Thanks, Jade. Thanks for the invite. Really pleased to address the meeting on your manifesto launch. And it's because really CWU have been big supporters of the community wealth building project, and in particular the way that Matt and the team have led the changes in Preston and the work that you continue to do. And I suppose I want to set out some reasons for that. I think first of all, for me, I think what you're doing and community wealth building offers a real progressive agenda that is the only one that I can see out there at the moment that is challenging what I would term fouled Westminster politics, and a way of, that people have become disengaged in politics. I think this agenda has an opportunity to challenge that, and is doing that on the ground. And I think people are in a place at the moment, and certainly our members are in a place where, they're fed up with finger pointing, people pushing blame around the political agenda. I think they're fed up with people who do politics in theory, but can't deliver anything on the ground. And that's why this is so important, because it connects with people locally, many of whom, we've got lots of members who will be in and around the Preston area. And I know they're interested in this agenda because they can see the difference that it's making. I think another reason that I would very much push this agenda forward is very similar to what Gray said. I think the challenge that we all face, that connects all of the other big challenges that we're facing at the moment, is the fact and the reality that there has been a structural imbalance of power and wealth in the world of work, in how the economy operates, and through all the divisions that you see that are permeating society at the moment. And this agenda can address those issues. And, you know, for me, it's so refreshing to hear this happening at a time when we hear Boris Johnson with his phony levelling up agenda. And we know, and I think people are beginning to see through Johnson now and the Tories. You know, they're never going to level up, because to level up, you've got to level out power and wealth. And your agenda, when I look at your manifesto and all the work that you've been doing, it connects all of the key issues that people want to see tackled. From a CW perspective, as a trade union, we're interested because I think we face similar problems. You know, we want to engage our members. We want to improve the workers' terms and conditions. But we also know that our members are expecting more from their unions now. They're really worried about the things that are happening to them. And I think they know that you can't just do that through the workplace. So you've got to connect your industrial and your political strategies. And I want to give you a few examples of how CWU is doing that and how we can actually work with you and others who pursue the community wealth building project agenda. And trade unions can be a key part of developing this for working people. So the first one for me would be the future of the post office. We've spent years now, frankly, with successive governments, trying to bring through a more innovative post office. And what we've seen is a lack of investment, a lack of clear thinking about the value of the post office as an institution. Yes, it has to bring through new products, new services, but that can be done. And for the first time ever, we're now talking to regional politicians, local politicians like Matt, regional mayors, who are actually willing to work with us and develop a cooperative model of a post office that really does work for the community. And we're excited about that. That offers a future that there's no other political party offering at the moment. So, you know, it's important for us to develop those ideas. We can develop inclusive banking. We can develop the post office as a community hub. It can start to help rebuild the high streets that will be in your area. And all of this can be done in collaboration with working people. And they can have a greater voice and a greater say over how the post office is actually run. So this is, for us, really important. On a similar basis, we're talking about expanding the role of postal workers. You know, our members have done a fantastic job during the pandemic. They've been out there every day. They've connected the country, including our engineers who deal with broadband. You know, we've seen some really great things that are being done, but they want hope. They want to know that the future of their industries, of their jobs in helping communities can be done. And this project allows us to think about other ways, other products, other services, building the local economy and using some of our own infrastructure, postal workers and their jobs who've got great knowledge of the areas that you work in. Bringing that all together, for me, it is a really exciting future project that we can work with you on. And it will be our people locally who will lead that debate. And that's important to me as well. Similarly, you know, to end the digital exclusion that we've seen in the UK and to deliver inclusive broadband, proper gigabit, highest level speed broadband, we can develop a workers' charter that will work for all of the workers in that industry. And this is, again, what I see that you're doing that's different to anywhere else. You're not talking about it, you're actually delivering it on the ground. The CWU believes that the labour movement is at a crossroads, and I include in that where the trade union movement goes. And we're always looking for new models of working together, new models of engaging working people, reconnecting with working people on the ground. And we're developing our own strategy. We call it simply building collectivism. And it's got three strands to it. One is we're urging the trade union movement now to come together and campaign for a new deal for workers. And you'll hear more about that in the coming weeks and months. And I think that's a distinct trade union led agenda. And I think that will start to resonate with working people everywhere. And we're going to come out on a tour around the country, preparing for a big national rally on the 18th of June. The second one is in our relationship with the Labour Party. We want to work with Labour, but we want to work with Labour people who are serious about change. You know, we're finished with tinkering at the edges, and the stuff that you're doing, we know will change people's lives, and will change working people's lives, most importantly. So from our perspective, you know, our strategy of building collectivism means that we'll retarget, if you like, the money that we spend politically more towards projects like your own. And that's what our regional people are saying to us as well, which is, you know, really good, because it engages them, because they can, you know, recognise the identity of the work and living and working in places like Preston. We want to do that on a wider scale. And finally, it allows us, and you've seen that tonight, it allows us to start working with community organisations again. Recently, the CWU and the GFTU, we hosted the first ever conference where we actually had trade unions and community organisations from across the UK in the same room. And we're really interested in what's been developing since the pandemic, where organisations like food bank organisations, like renters associations, like cooperatives, what it's all about is bringing people together. And I suppose my final message is, I think this is the best agenda that I've seen at a time when people more than ever need collectivism, need to believe again that you can make change happen. There's no better agenda out there at the moment than the Community Wealth Building Project. And we want to be part of that. And we want to make sure that working with you, we build and deliver collectivism as we move forward. So thanks very much.
Wow, thank you so much, Dave, for your support, for obviously being here tonight, and thank you for all the fantastic work that you do at the CWU. So now we are hopefully going to try and bring back Andy Birchall, as we're obviously really eager to hear what you just have to say, and fingers crossed there is no more Wi-Fi or connection issues. I know they're a pain in the bum. So Andy, is everything looking okay on your end?
It seems all right at this end. You'll have to tell me. I've
Seems
tried
a lot
to reboot
better,
everything.
so that's it's a good start.
Oh, okay. Andy Birchall. I'm from Unite the Union. I've been part of the labour movement since I was born, you know, and was a coal miner. Ended up in FE, HE, then back in HE as a tutor, lecturer, humanities, then trade union education. Working in Preston for most of that time in education, and getting to know the community, and actually loving working there. I live in Wigan, but I always view Preston as my adopted home, actually, because I know so many people that live and work there. So when this was developing years ago with Matthew, the community wealth building and developing cooperatives, I thought I must go along and have a look what's happening here. And I was so enthused. And, you know, I said to Matthew at the time, this won't be easy, because nothing we ever attempt to do is, you know, but we, you know, the Labour Party is to represent Labour. I think, you know, we fundamentally create the wealth, and we want to have a share of it. And what better way to do that than to own and control and be part of your own businesses? So when we had a look at the Mondragon model, what we decided was that we need an education centre that was purely to support the development of cooperatives. And so we've launched the Preston Cooperative Education Centre. It's a union co-op, because we're all trade unionists that are directors of it. People will be members. If you're part of a cooperative that we educate and help go in, we'd like you to be members. We'd like anyone who has the burning desire to support the educational process, then you can be members. You'll have voting rights like any other cooperative. does. But I think what's really, really important that we, as labouring, working people, become confident and realise, you know, our own status in the wealth creating process. And there's nothing more important than that. And I think once we realise that, once we start to create sustainable businesses where those surpluses are shared with the workforce, shared with the community, there'll be businesses that won't mind paying the taxes as long as they're fair taxes and not burdensome. And I think we will develop a different community with core different values. And part of the reason of wanting an education centre was because behind this business model is a different set of values based on community, based on solidarity, based on caring, based on the value of labour. And so we want to be efficient, we want to be effective, we want to create surpluses, but the ethos, the ethics of the business model will be completely different. And Preston, you know, by accident, I've worked in Preston and I know people in Preston. And as Dave Ward was just saying, you're leading the way. And I said it to Matthew earlier today. Matthew, you're the only person, or Preston and Preston Labour Council are the only people giving people like me hope now. Yeah, this model is really important. It's not easy, and we know it's not easy, and there's going to be, as there always is, barriers and struggles along the way, but it's worth keep going, because if we're successful, we will fundamentally change not only our communities, but people's working lives. And as a trade unionist, I'll finish on this, it's really, really important. If you're a worker, you know, I'm 60 now, but I've always felt at work, even when I worked in FE, in colleges, I've always felt at work, I get on in spite of my bosses, not because of them. And it's only in times of trouble they turn around to the workers and say, things aren't quite working right. What do we do now? And how can we put, you know, and I just think our contribution in the eyes of capital, in the eyes of neoliberalism, is always undervalued. They try to undervalue our status. And the pandemic has reasserted who are the important people in our society, our economy. And so I think for Preston, you're leading the way. I'm so proud to be associated with it. And the councillors, if they're on this call, and the candidates, I do wish you sincerely all the best. I hope you clear the Tories out and any other opposition, so every single one of you can champion this in your community, and you can lead the way on common ownership, because we've put it on the back burner for far too long now in our party. We can lead the way on common ownership and show the rest of Lancashire and the rest of our society how this can be done. And I do believe Preston is really leading the way. So thank you for including me tonight, but more or less, thank you for having the policy that's giving people like me and others hope. All the best.
Oh, thank you so much, Andy. We really appreciate your support, and I'm so glad we managed to get you back after those IT issues, as obviously what you had to say was absolutely fantastic. So we really appreciate that. One of our last speakers tonight is someone I'm really happy to introduce, which is leader of Preston City Council, Matthew Brown. So Matthew is widely credited to be the driving force behind the Preston model, which has been a transformative economic approach to battling austerity. Under Matthew's leadership, we've fought many successful elections, led some landmark schemes, and have achieved so much despite constantly facing the threat of the Conservative government. And I'm very happy to be able to be a councillor under his amazing administration. So thank you, Matthew.
Brilliant, Jade. Can you hear me okay? Fantastic. Okay, I hope everyone can hear me. Yeah, listen, really delighted to be obviously leading Preston Labour into this campaign. It's a fantastic, actually, campaign. Some of the ideas we have, some of the candidates, all 17 candidates that we do have, and we've sadly lost a dearly loved councillor, John Brown, so there'll be 2 candidates in Brookfield. We're all really hungry to really transform Preston, to make sure that we do make sure it's a fair and democratic and equal place to live, really, and tackle those injustices. And I'm also delighted as well that in terms of our candidates, we're going to be the most diverse. We're heading towards 50% female representation, which is really good to try and change the culture within local politics, often previously very male dominated, and in terms of ethnicity, age, and also LGBTQ plus and disability, again, we do represent the community out there a lot more, which is really positive. So every single one of our candidates is going to not be managers. We don't seek this position for our own personal careers or individual aspiration. It's really a collective aspiration to really, transform the community. We don't want to manage the situation. We want to transform the community, and especially try to deal with the structural inequalities which were really evident during the pandemic. People have been through a lot in communities like Preston. Obviously, we've had since 1979 a model which obviously things did improve substantially between 1997 to 2010. But in terms of the economic model, it's been one that's been quite neoliberal around privatisation, deregulation, and other things that do disadvantage working people. So obviously we've had that economic model for decades. So back in Preston in the 50s, 60s and 70s, you had very well paid manufacturing jobs. Many of them disappeared. Our community's been through that. We then had 15 years ago the financial crash, which led to austerity. So our council was basically had more than a third in terms of its spending power to spend on local services and help our community. We then had a hard Brexit as well on top of that, and now the worst public health crisis since World War II. So, as the many eloquent speakers before, Mark, Grace, Dave, many others were saying, people don't want more of the same. We do need transformative change, and we're trying to do that locally with the powers and influence that we do have still as a council. So the next few days we'll launch our manifesto, which is called Preston for the Many. It's been out to consultation with members in unions. It's quite a radical document, and we've got to really try and bring that change to our community and really deepen it. We've got a very, very strong foundation, but we want to really deepen that change. So a few of the things we're going to do. Firstly, we're going to regenerate our city centre. And the way we're doing it now is not singing to the tunes of corporate developers, which is what we probably did 10 or 15 years ago. We're doing it ourselves, and we're doing it primarily in local public ownership. So we've taken political decisions to develop a cinema and leisure project, which wouldn't happen unless we did it. Obviously, we're restoring the Harris Museum and Amounderness House, and we're going to also fund the youth zone. That'll be a charitable project, and the vast majority of this will actually be owned by the city. So again, any profits will go back to the community. So it's really positive for city centre regeneration. Crucially as well, we're going to look at cultural activity, having a resurgence of that. So in the city centre, we're starting in the next couple of weeks, you're going to see resurgence of creativity and expression in our city centre. There's going to be the mobile events tent that's going to take place. We're going to have performance and arts and other forms of expression in our city centre. And again, that's a way of really regenerating our local economy. So it's less about the traditional ways of doing things and really about having a creative economy linked to community wealth building. Also, as well, we're determined to bring the Preston Guildhall, and obviously we took that back into public ownership, into use as soon as we feasibly can, and obviously we're still working on that behind the scenes. And then also, as has been alluded to before, we do work with our big institutions. So we spent tens of millions of pounds by just buying from Preston-based companies and getting positive social value outcomes into that as well. And we really want to deepen that. So when we do this city centre regeneration, we will be getting a real living wage in there, new apprentices, taking people from less deprived communities in there, moving towards net zero supply chains, but crucially making sure that they have trade union access and recognition. So the GMB, for example, has managed to get trade union access through the supply chain on the HS2 project. We're going to be one of the first areas piloting that principle on our cinema project. So trade unions all through the supply chain will have access to the workers, and hopefully can get a significant amount of them unionised as part of that process. And then also through our planning system, we actually say to all developers over a certain size, you must use local suppliers and local labour. And all that put together, as well as the NHS recruiting locally and targeting that recruitment in the areas of highest unemployment and targeting minority communities and women and others, that is really leading to hundreds of new jobs as part of these plans. So we expect lots more jobs because of the decisions that the Labour Council has taken. So as Dave said earlier, obviously we're very keen on having a democratic economy. We've heard from Andy and John, who are supporting democratic firms in terms of firms that are owned by the workers and the housing cooperative, which we facilitated. We've established 6 new worker-owned businesses that are registered already, and we're looking at a lot more. We want to create a culture working with communities where it's not a dynamic where you've got to work for an exploitative boss. You can actually be encouraged to form companies which are, in the ownership of the people who actually produce the wealth of those firms, which is the workers. So obviously, we're trying to create a culture where we support that. We're looking at sectors around construction, retrofitting, working with former prisoners, digital economy, social care that can't be brought back in-house. And we're working on that, really. So that's a very exciting agenda. And obviously, we've got to educate people that there are alternatives out there. Because I think for so long, people have just been taught that the same way of doing things has to be the way we got to do things. There are real alternatives as well. We are on with establishing a regional cooperative bank. The reality is the large banks are withdrawing from our high street. We've seen in some constituencies of our region, 70% of bank branches which have disappeared. We're working now with Greater Manchester as well as Liverpool City region to establish a regional cooperative bank. And obviously, we hope to get that underway in the next year and a half. Obviously, the pandemic has got in the way of that slightly, but we're committed to that. And like the community bank in Wales, a cooperative bank there, we'd expect that to open 30 new branches across a footprint of around 3 million or so in the next 8 to 10 years. We're committed to do that. And then also in the manifesto is what we're exploring at the moment with the utility providers is that we establish a new publicly owned broadband as provider, because obviously there is issues around digital exclusion of the poverty that does bring, and we're working with City Fibre to look at how we can establish a publicly owned broadband service that will actually offer digital services to people in less well-off communities. And they're very much a pro-workers' rights agenda. We were the first living wage employer in the north of England. We've now got the best out of 14 council areas for people who receive at least £9.90 an hour. It should be a lot higher, I believe, but obviously that is what the foundation sets. We're moving to be a real living wage city, and through any devolution arrangement, which we're currently negotiating, we want to make sure that we do have a fair employment charter as part of that devolution deal. I mean, Mark did allude very eloquently to the issues around the cost of living crisis. We've taken political choices to establish holiday markets, which are feeding hungry kids during the summer holidays. We're now looking at 40 outlets, including holiday markets, but also food pantries, community kitchens and other things, so people can actually access food as a right. Obviously, the cost of living is going to be very difficult for people. People will be able to go to one of these community food hubs and actually access food, and that's really important because that can save people £30 or £40 a shop. And we're looking again how we can get communities together to establish food purchasing cooperatives. Energy efficiency, we're going to continue retrofitting homes. We've got funding to do that. And then also tackling the cost of living crisis. Housing is really important because we say to developers, you must provide at least 30% affordable houses. That's seen again, us being the best council out of 14 in Lancashire for new affordable houses being built, over 500 in the last 2 years. 48% of all properties in the latest figures were affordable that were built within Preston. We're looking at how we can free up public sector land for more affordable housing. We're committed to, and we're very much hoping we can do this, establish a council house-owned company like Salford that's going to start developing council housing in the next 12 months in Preston. And then look at more democratic forms of housing like John's Housing Cooperative and even a community land trust that we're looking at to have within Plungington within Preston. So that's democratic housing that's actually owned by the community. So we're doing that. And then also, this Labour Council has been responsible for getting external funding of millions for Preston's parks. We're looking to invest further in them. We're looking to plant new trees. We want to have buses under democratic control like Andy Burnham. We're going to be arguing for that. But we're also going to argue that the public sector with its partners like the NHS and our university, we should be producing energy in local public ownership that is actually going to be very environmentally friendly and actually do that to save money. That's going to be a big part of where we're going what we're going to do going forward. And then crucially as well, we've just seen, haven't we, during the pandemic, how those structural inequalities often based around, ethnicity, disability and income, it really has disproportionately affected people. So we're going to work with our NHS and try to influence them to put community health hubs in less deprived communities. We're looking at whether they can look at long-term empty commercial properties, whether that could be a role for the NHS there in the city centre. And crucially as well, a new hospital that has made the shortlist. We've lobbied for that, but we think it needs more funding for Preston. And crucially, we've got to oppose any, private involvement in NHS services going forward. And then finally, as well, and very, very importantly, is that obviously we've got to support all our communities in Preston. We've seen during the pandemic how everyone really pulled together in all our diverse communities, the faith communities, religious communities, and other things. So obviously, we're going to work with Show Racism the Red Card to have a very strong anti-racist agenda, including tackling Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. We've worked with our African Caribbean community for a new community facility. We're going to make sure that when housing is developed, that we look to have appropriate community facilities, and also that in addition to that as well, that access to affordable housing and also places of worship is appropriate for minority communities and our diverse communities. And then crucially as well, we're going to tackle, we're going to really support rights of disabled people and older people and young people. So things like changing places, facilities, mental health awareness, getting young people obviously into engagement with the youth zone, but into jobs as well as older people, and making people aware of the positives of growing older, which is something we're going to work on. An LGBTQ plus community as well. It's this Labour Council that supported the first Preston Pride 10 years ago that has expanded, and we want to see it back after the pandemic and support that community as well. And just very, very finally, obviously work to tackle crime and antisocial behaviour in communities, especially focusing on hate crime and violence against women and girls, which is still an epidemic in many places. So put together, it's a radical Labour Council. It isn't going to stop until we've transformed Preston, until we've actually moved our local economy and community into something that we're more in control of, with the council, its institutions and the community, and great partners like trade unions and local businesses. So all 17 of our candidates are pretty amazing going forward. They're all going to be committed to working really hard in your communities, making sure that issues are tackled, but crucially putting this agenda forward. We've got a Tory and Liberal party locally who have no ideas, who oppose community wealth building, who oppose the plans we have for a community bank. We're the only party that actually has a manifesto, that has a vision, and please support us on Thursday, May the 5th. Come and vote for us, or if you're inspired by what we've heard today, potentially consider joining our campaign, or even joining the Labour Party, because we've got a movement here that is going to be pretty much unstoppable if we continue to be successful after May the 5th. So a big thanks from me for everyone who spoke today. Jade, thanks for stepping in and sharing this, and also the people behind the scenes. It's been an amazing event, and I love to hear what the candidates have to say next, because we've got 5 or 6 candidates who are standing in key wards within Preston. Thank you very much.
Oh, fantastic as always, Matthew. Really pleased that obviously you've come forward and spoken about all of this, all the things we're going to do, and looking forward to continuing all of our good work after the election. So our last speakers of the night are going to be a number of our candidates in the upcoming election. They're just going to guide us through our 6 manifesto pledges, introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about some of the issues they hope to tackle in their wards if they win. So the person who's going to be handling the first pledge is candidate Amber Afzal.
Hi everybody, my name is Amber Afzal. I am standing as the Labour candidate in Garrison Ward for Preston City Council. My interest in politics arises from the need to put families first in council decision-making processes. As a mother of a young family, I know firsthand the priorities for families, and I will put families at the core of decision-making. There is a fantastic and dedicated team of Labour councillors already in place, and I look forward to working closely with them to support the residents and their families. I have already been made aware of some concerns within the ward, such as potholes on Midgery Lane, which is a part of the Guild Wheel. I plan to work closely with county councillors to address this issue as soon as possible. I am extremely keen to get involved and help residents in every way I can. I would like to discuss the first pledge in the 2022 Labour Manifesto, which is all about regenerating the city centre with over £60 million of public funding. Recently, a new family entertainment development was announced, which will provide excellent new leisure facilities, including a new cinema, bowling alley, restaurants and a youth zone for our residents. This will create hundreds of new job opportunities right here in Preston and allow us to spend quality and fun times with our families without the need to travel far. Rising cost of living is a concern for every household at the moment also. So this new facility will be a welcome addition to our city centre, as well as the new jobs it will bring. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Amber. That was fantastic. So introducing our second pledge of the evening is Taksin Akhtar.
Hi, my name is Taksin Akhtar and I'm proud to be an NHS nurse. I'm standing as a Labour's candidate in Cadley Ward so that I can continue to support Cadley residents' health and wellbeing needs. I want to address the hidden poverty for pensioners and families caused by Tory tax rises and funding cuts for services. I'm proud to propose Preston's Labour's second pledge. This is for an economy working for all, with public contracts supporting local businesses and union jobs, for a growing co-op sector and Preston becoming a real living wage city. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Taksin. So handling pledges 3 and 4 will be candidate David Borrow.
Good evening, everyone. I'm David Borrow, the Labour candidate for Little Larches. I've been a councillor there for the last 3 years. The first policy pledge I need to talk about is the work we're doing around culture and the arts. And the main part of that is the way in which our Harris Museum and Art Gallery, one of our 2 Grade 1 listed buildings, is being completely refurbished and reimagined at the moment in a way which will make it more accessible to the public and create more performance spaces within the building. We're also beginning to revitalise cultural performance and the performing arts in the city, and with a whole range of activities planned for the remainder of this year. If I can perhaps move on to the next one, if that's okay. Matthew has probably said everything I had written down on my bit of paper to talk about affordable housing. So what I need to say is that when I was in my 20s, which was during the 70s, most people could aspire to buy their first house. I think I was 27 when I bought my first house in Preston. But these days, that's very difficult for young people to do. And even people in their 30s and 40s struggle to buy a house. But in the 1970s, if you weren't able to buy a house, or weren't able to buy a house at that particular time and had a family, you were pretty certain to be able to get a council house. If you had a council house, the rent was affordable and you'd got security of tenure. So you knew you'd got a home. A lot of people these days with families, with children, are paying higher rents for private rented property with no security of tenure, no sense that they can live there for the indefinite future. And they're always worried in case 6 months' time, 12 months' time, the landlord will say, I need your house, you're going to have to move out and look for somewhere else. That isn't the way to bring up families. That isn't the way to bring up children, which is why in Preston, we feel it's so important to find more and more affordable houses, either to buy or, in my opinion, even more important, to rent the social housing. And that is a key part of our pledge. And for me, I'm passionate about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, for that. The person who will be handling our next pledge, which is pledge 5 in the manifesto, is candidate Robert Boswell.
Jade. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, perfectly.
Thanks, Jade, and well done. Boswell, I'm the candidate for Ashton Ward, which is a sort of suburban ward and faces different issues than the other wards in Preston. I was first elected in 1986 and I've been on the cabinet since 2011, working with Matthew and Martin and the other cabinet members. The pledge I focused on is one that reads, action to tackle climate change through the strategic planting of thousands of new trees with partners, more renewable energy production and further investments in parks and open spaces, encouraging biodiversity. I look at the parks as a jewel in the crown in Preston. It's what defines us in many ways. We've got a whole range of different parks in different localities serving different needs. And, you know, you had to be on the parks a lot, as a lot of people were during lockdown, to realise that the parks were the one place where people could go when there was very little else for them to do, or go or be stuck at home. And I'm convinced that the parks help keep people sane during lockdown, and maybe, I'm not exaggerating, might even have saved lives, because it was the one place. And if you went on the parks, you saw a great many people wandering around the parks, and I'm very proud that we made our parks accessible and over a wide range of Preston. I've also energy efficiency. Mr. Miliband has taken my issue. Heat or eat. Fuel poverty is the thing that's occurring a lot now. But you reduce fuel poverty not just by lowering the price of fuel or increasing people's wages. You can do it by insulating houses, was what Ed talked about, and that makes it mean you're not using the same amount of energy to heat a house. Therefore, your bills come down, and it has a second added advantage of helping climate change. So you achieve two major policy objectives in one, and that is what we're always looking out for, grants to help, because we have a lot of old housing. Some are very energy inefficient, and we want to bring them up to date. I also like allotment provision. This is something again I've championed over the 10 or 11 years I've been involved in the cabinet. We need to grow more food and fruit in Preston, so it doesn't have to be transported across the country. Again, helping with the climate change. It helps with poverty. It gets the community working together. And we've always tried to target people to get allotments, those without gardens and those on low incomes. I think those are the ones who need allotments more than anything else. We have discounts for pensioners and those unwaged, which have been frozen for 10 years. So this is how we try and get them in. We try and target them. But as an end in itself, it's all very good. There are other areas, but it's not covered in the pledge. So I think I'll finish there. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Robert. So our last pledge, Pledge 6, that's going to be covered by candidate Samir Vora.
Good evening. Thank you very much for this, Jade. I'm Samir, and I will be representing Sherrow Green Ward this time round. It's the third time that I've actually been a candidate in Sherrow Green Ward. So I'm very happy to have another go at breaking the Tory hold on Sherrow Green Ward. So fingers crossed that we'll do well again this year. So the pledge that I will be talking about is affordable food in every community by supporting holiday markets, food pantries and hot meal providers, and investigating a new school breakfast initiative with free fruit. I think this is really important, especially with the recent mega rises in energy prices, where a lot of families are thinking, should they heat their homes or should they eat? So I think this is another great plan coming from Preston City Council to make sure every resident in Preston doesn't get left out and doesn't have to choose between heating and eating. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Samir. Thank you to all of our candidates for just telling us about themselves and what they hope to achieve and just explaining our pledges. And so that one wraps up our event tonight. I know it's come to an end far too soon, but I just want to extend a huge thanks to all of our speakers tonight. It's been brilliant hearing from you and listening to all of your great contributions. And to close what's been a really great evening, I just want to address everyone watching. You might think, obviously, with everyone backing us, with all of our really supportive speakers, all of our pledges on Manifesto, that success in the coming elections, not just in Preston, but across the country, is a given. But it's not a mindset that we should have going forward. Next month's election is as crucial as any other. We don't just want to keep Preston red, we want to see more Labour faces in more wards, because the more councillors we have across the council, the more we're able to achieve. If you look at everything we've been able to do now, just think of what we could achieve going forward with more people on our side, turning Preston red. I know a lot of people do find that the thought of being involved in an election campaign quite intimidating, and it does stop them from putting themselves forward to get involved to help. But even the smallest of contributions can really have the biggest effect. So whether that's joining the Labour Party, helping to deliver leaflets, speaking to your neighbours, getting out on the doorsteps, talking to people, sharing our posts and liking our posts on social media. All of this is crucial in making sure we keep the Tories out and we get Labour in, because all these small acts, all these small actions, they do add up to big action, and that in itself is going to help us win. So while the government consistently takes advantage of us and seeks to make lives harder, our Labour Council's goal is to make life better and to improve lives of the people in the city and beyond. We don't just want to have a flourishing city. You know, we want a city where people have a living wage, where they have fantastic nightlife and places to enjoy themselves in the day. They have a beautiful bustling market and loads of shops, you know, have stable jobs, and they don't have to worry about feeding the children or keeping their homes warm. You know, let's turn Preston completely red, so all of that just doesn't have to be a dream, it can be a reality, and we can make that a reality if we vote Labour. So make sure on May 5th that you get out, that you vote Labour, and vote for real change with Preston. Thank you so much everyone for tuning in today, and have a good evening. Thank you very much.